Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell here, and since the House of Commons has been back in session, well, the politicians have been moving very quickly, especially on Bill C2, which is the latest benefit or pandemic support bill that the Liberals have recently brought forward. Now, this bill is controversial on many fronts. On the left-leaning front, it's controversial because it doesn't help as many people as you may expect, and this is something that the NDP have been really pushing on, especially given the OAS and GIS clawbacks. And on the other side of things, on the more right-leaning side of things, this bill is controversial because it introduces $7 billion more of government spending, especially at a time when inflation is at an all-time high and many people are struggling with the rising cost of living. But despite this controversy, it seems that the Liberal government have found some new dancing partners to help them pass through this legislation. So in today's video, we're going to go over exactly what has happened, where this bill is in the legislative process, how quickly it could pass, as well as the likelihood that these problems such as the GIS clawbacks and CCB clawbacks, as well as the lack of support for people who were previously on the CRB, well, how likely that is to pass, as well as some other roadblocks that could stop this bill from being passed through. But before we do, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out the links in the description. Currently, there's a promotion on where you can get 2 free stocks when you sign up with Wealthsimple, so make sure to check that out. But now let's get into exactly what has happened recently. Now, if you watched my last video, you'll know that the Liberals were trying to pass Bill C2 without the Finance Committee even having a chance to meet. Now, there was a motion that recently changed this. Let's listen in. On Friday, a motion was passed through the House of Commons that effectively did 2 things. The first thing was that it restarted the Finance Committee and added all the new people into that Finance Committee. And the second thing is that eventually this committee, and I believe that this is on Thursday of this week, will have a 2-hour session where they're going to be able to question Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Now, this is important because this Finance Committee is the committee that will be taking a closer look at Bill C2 with things like the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, the changes to the CRCB and the CRSB. This Finance Committee, during this session, where they're going to talk about it at these committee meetings, well, they have the opportunity to change some wording and to change some aspects of this bill before it goes back to the House of Commons for third reading. So this is a big deal. But an important thing to note is that this motion allowed for an interesting sort of split up of this Finance Committee. This Committee on Finance, the one that's going to be able to make these decisions, will be composed of 6 members of the Liberal Party, 4 members of the Conservative Party, 1 member of Le Bloc Québécois, and 1 member of the NDP. So you'll see here, in order for them to actually make any changes to this Liberal legislation, well, they need all 4 members of the Conservative Party that are on this committee, as well as another member from the Bloc Québécois and NDP, in order to make up the 6 members that the Liberals have, so that they could get to 50-50 on any given vote where they would want to change some legislation. So it seems unlikely that with this makeup they're actually going to be able to change anything. And despite both the Conservatives and the NDP, for their own reasons, opposing this Bill C2, well, there was a vote on Friday and this bill has passed through the second reading. So now is the point where this will go to that committee we just talked about, where they're going to be able to potentially make changes. But one interesting thing to note is how many yay votes we had and how many nay votes we had and what each individual party voted. And to take a closer look at that, we can actually see the voting here. We can see that the Conservatives voted nay. They voted against this being passed. Liberals voted yes, of course. The NDP, this was interesting, voted nay, so they are not in support of this bill, as well as the Conservatives, but the Liberals did find a dancing partner, and that is you'll see right here, the Bloc Québécois, who voted yes alongside the Liberals. So even though the Conservatives with 119 votes and the NDP with 25 votes and the Green Party with 2 votes, even if they all decided that they didn't like this bill, well, that would not equal the Liberals' 159 plus the Bloc Québécois' 32 additional votes. So it seems that the Liberals have now ditched their previous NDP working buddies that would help them pass their bills and have gone with the Bloc Québécois, at least for this Bill C2. This is especially interesting because previously the Bloc Québécois had fought very hard for seniors and seniors' rights, especially when it came to the splitting up of 2 different age categories with the OAS, but now it seems that the Bloc Québécois are okay passing the Liberals' bill, even though it doesn't solve this problem where many of the lowest income seniors have had some of their small amounts of money, these benefits clawed back as part of the GIS system in that issue that came up with the benefits sort of counting towards income, and as a result, people getting less guaranteed income supplement. So it seems like now it's only the NDP that are pushing the Liberals very hard on this this GIS clawback, as well as the CCB clawback that was very similar. And the Liberals say that they are working on this issue, but their problem is that they don't want to sort of turn off the fact that the CRB and the CERB counted as income, because that would reward people who were on those benefits rather than the people who had actually gotten jobs and gone to work and experienced the gain in income and as a result of working rather than as a result of claiming benefits. So what exactly happens next? Well, as of today, the Finance Committee is starting to meet. They have one meeting that's going on currently as I'm filming this, and another meeting later today, as well as, like I mentioned, on Thursday, they're going to have some testimony from Chrystia Freeland, where they're going to ask questions about potential changes they want to make to this bill. So stay tuned for that, because I'm sure that we'll get some interesting takes, both from the Conservatives, the NDP, as well as the Liberals, because certainly the NDP and the Conservatives are currently against what's been going on with this Bill C2. And it's very likely that a lot of these questions will be around an issue that both the NDP and the Conservatives have sort of aligned on, and that is the inflation crisis that we're currently facing. And this is sort of reflected in this recent Nanos poll, when people were asked to choose between 4 different main concerns or greatest worries between the pandemic, reconciliation, climate change, and inflation. Well, we see a whopping 36% of Canadians replied that the rising cost of living is one of their highest concerns. And it makes sense that this is a top concern, especially for some of the Canadians who have been relying on benefits since the beginning of the pandemic. Well, all of a sudden those benefits are cut off alongside this increasingly fast rise in the cost of living. And this is something that is being focused on by both sides. And there's an interesting take here in this interview on CTV. Let's listen in on it, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it after you've listened to it.
People are going to want to hear, not just from the Liberal government, but from the opposition parties, what they're going to do about inflation. I think it's fair for the opposition parties to criticize the government of the day. That's their job, Joyce. That's their job. However, it's not enough. Aaron O'Toole and Jagmeet Singh, as leaders of the opposition, they need to propose what they would do as an alternative, because I think right now Canadians are very grumpy. They're very pessimistic. And they want to, maybe perhaps hear less bickering and more solutions about what the path forward is.
And I think he's right that this inflation and cost of living increase that would typically be honed in on the Conservatives has now become a multiple opposition party issue, with Jagmeet Singh and the NDP also hopping on board of this criticism of the Liberals in that there's high inflation currently. Although the Liberals the NDP and the Conservatives definitely have different takes on why this inflation is happening, currently the NDP doesn't think that it's due to the mass spending on benefit programs and the billions of dollars created to fund these programs since the beginning of the pandemic, although the NDP don't really give an answer as to what exactly they think caused inflation over the past year and a half. Instead, Jagmeet Singh has really honed in on the housing costs that have been rising, as well as phone bill costs due to the relative monopoly over phone infrastructure here in Canada. And that's something that the NDP have recently been pushing on, saying, hey, we need to get the cost of living down, not through changing the way that we handle our monetary policy, but instead focusing on real estate costs and rental costs, as well as cell phone bills. While on the other side of things, the Conservatives are heavily criticizing both the Liberals and the Bank of Canada for their fiscal and monetary policy, given that there was so much new money added into the Canadian monetary system, as a result diluting the value of everyone else's Canadian dollars. This is something that's really been honed in on by finance critic Pierre Poilievre. And the Liberals' response to these concerns of inflation is that, well, it's not their fault, and that the inflation is more of a global phenomenon, something that's happening in the States, as well as Canada and many other developed nations across the world. And the other thing that they'll always bring up when they're questioned about inflation is that they're currently working on affordability through their various housing programs that have had limited success, as well as their childcare program that they've been partnering with multiple provinces across the country, saying that, hey, by focusing on this reduction in costs on childcare, well, maybe that sort of counteracts the affordability crisis. But I definitely think it's something that needs to be talked about and criticized more heavily, because it's likely the most low-income people who aren't able to invest in assets like real estate, stocks, and potential digital assets who lose the value of their Canadian dollars when this inflation happens, whereas the wealthy people who are able to more readily invest their income, well, they tend to benefit in high inflationary periods, because inflation tends to have an effect on asset inflation and raises the price of those very things: stocks, real estates, potentially digital assets like Bitcoin and Ether. So I'll be taking a closer look at Chrystia Freeland's Finance Committee hearing, as well as in 1 week today, Chrystia Freeland's set to give a big update in the House of Commons about the budget and the fiscal track that they're on, which could include more information about these benefits and what they're planning on doing with the current cost of living crisis. But with all of that said, I hope this video has helped you out. Let me know what you think about it down there in the comment section. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. And again, anytime you use any of those links at the top of the description, that helps out the channel directly. So when you do that, you're supporting more Canadian content like this being made. So thank you for that. But with all of that said, thanks for watching. Hope this video has helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.